One of the things that I enjoy most is talking to people who have a mind of Christ, who just see everything in life from a spiritual perspective. Because I truly believe that the things that we see on earth are first manifested in the spiritual. And so once you have a spiritual discerning of whatever it is that's happening to you, you really truly have clarity and you have truth, and that truth is what sets you free. One of my absolute favorite people to talk to is my guest for today, Esther Longe. Dr. Esther Longe. Today.
Hello. How are you?
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
What's up?
Chilling.
Feeling good?
Yeah.
Okay. So this our conversation today is a bit. We've kind of had it in different variations, but maybe not as personal, one-on-one as much, as what we'll do today. But one of the streams or expressions of your ministry, God in real life, Girl Talk, God in real life outreach, is the broken ministry, which is something I partook of. And that's where, it's really about healing from emotional issues and also understanding the truth about the Father and who He is and how He sees us. Let me paint a picture to kind of get specific. Or let me first say, there's a lot of people in this country that are hurting. There's a lot of people who have gone through a lot of sexual tragedies, emotional tragedies, and are just living a hurtful life. And one thing that people say, or experts say, is that a person who hurts other people has been hurt themselves because you can only repeat what you have learned, right? So that means that the more we see hurt, the more it reflects on the fact that there are people who are hurting and are only just, showing what it is that they've learned. So I'm going to paint very specific scenarios. So my story, and I'm sure you heard some of it with my conversation with Omilola, when I was about 4, had amazing parents. My dad was the pastor, eventually became a pastor, and we're great Christians and middle class, trying to provide for my older brother and I, right? And in trying to provide for us, they had to do certain things. One of the things that they had to do was leave us at home sometimes with trusted people. Now, I can't exactly remember because I've been told that sometimes the mind will suppress certain information. That's how it copes. But at the age of 4, being molested, and then also being effeminate myself. And I think one of the things that later on led to, being same-sex attracted, for me, more so than even being molested, because there are a lot of people who don't get molested that are same-sex attracted. One of the things for me was the projection from people, so not understanding that it's okay that a man can be effeminate, and trying to put it into a box because we just, as human beings, we're wired to make sense of things. And so trying to make sense of what they were saying, projected, this is how you must be same-sex attracted and whatnot. That spiraled into living a life that was being reinforced to me. And I've come through all of that now. But there are lots of people like that who've been through those sorts of issues. Cyberbullying is on the rise right now. Children are going through so much, dealing with parents who are more invested and interested in making themselves look good through their kids than actually paying attention to their children. But my question ultimately in all of this is, and we'll talk about other scenarios as we go along, my question in all of this is, how do people who've gone through the kind of things that I've gone through begin to unpack? How do you start to even love yourself? Because first, it's I know that I well, thankfully I didn't have to deal with this so much, but I know other people who couldn't even see themselves as good as beautiful, first of all. So body, right? Um, their spirit is damaged, their soul is damaged. They feel a disconnect with God because they can't seem to understand that. I remember one of the many times for me was I would always wonder why this was my own cross. Because I could be a chronic liar. I could be any other thing. Why was same sex what was my own cross to bear? You know? And there are people who cannot seem to understand God as good because they cannot seem to understand why that would be, be their burden. How do you even start to accept that there is a God that loves you in the first place?
Wow, so that's a lot that God will give me the grace to unpack. But the first thing I wanted to say is when you say, "How come this is your own cross to bear?" It makes sense because
Mm,
you're doing this.
mm,
Do you know what I mean? You're doing this. And so what the devil meant for evil, God is turning it around for good because he knew that, in your healing process, you would also become a healer to other people.
yeah,
So that hopefully answers that
it does.
question. Yeah?
It does.
Okay. Now, you know, it's very clear in the Bible, right? What the devil's MO is and what God's MO is. So Jesus says, "I've come to give life and may have life more abundantly." And then the devil comes to kill, steal, and to destroy. So, but what happens is when we see situations where there's killing, there's destruction, and there's stealing, we end up blaming God for the very things that we should be blaming the devil for.
Mm,
Now, we can go back to the beginning of time, right? When dear Adam, is the fruits, and then put us in this sin-filled world. Now, what happened in that moment was dominion over the earth was handed over to the devil. So he has reign
mhm,
to kill, steal, and to destroy.
mhm,
Now, it's only when we come into Christ that we get access to live above
mhm.
the devil's reign. So now, when you understand that backdrop, it makes sense that from a very tender age, before you can even defend yourself, the devil is going to want to come and attack you. Because the devil can see the bright destiny that you have, and he's going to come in, he's going to try and hit your destiny. And if he can't kill you, then he'll try and steal your destiny. If he can't steal it, then he'll try and destroy it. Now, it really hurts my heart, when people feel like they're too broken to be fixed because
No such thing.
there's no such thing, and there's no story like that in the Bible. Like there's no precedent. So where do you get that from? Do you know what I mean? Like that became Paul was a murderer. Like he was killing people. He thought he was doing the right thing, but he was killing people. Okay, so the burden is sexuality. The burden is, feeling like, oh, you're not worthy, you're not pure. But have you killed anybody? Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Even denying Jesus. Yes, you denied Jesus, but so did Peter. Do you see what I'm saying? There are people who have gone through stuff, but God's love met them exactly where they were. So you cannot be too dirty for God. You can't be too broken for God because we are all sinners, and the Bible says there's no sin that is bigger than the other.
Yes.
So being a chronic liar is not any different from being a murderer in the eyes of God. The only sin that he says is so grievous is blaspheming against the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
Every other thing he says can be covered. I think in terms of getting to that place of accepting God's love, it starts with an honest conversation. Honest conversation like the one that we're having now. But I would advocate an honest conversation with God. It's okay to be angry with God. And this thing infuriates me about some of the traditions we've been fed in the church. Who are you to question God? You can't say this, you can't say that. Meanwhile, the Psalms are full of David saying, God, where are you?
What's happening?
What is happening? What is this? The only difference, it all ends in hope. Yet I will trust you. Yet you are good. Do you understand what I'm saying? But he could rant. He could. Because things happen in this world that will blow your mind. And you're like, God, if you're so good, then why did this thing happen? And what we need in that moment is for God to give us his own perspective of what happened. Because believe me, God was there, as painful as it seems. And to be honest, if you understood what the devil's plan was, you realize that he's one of the.
That God really did step in
He
there.
did. He did because the devil's plan is for you not to even be here sitting down.
Wow.
Because if he could have killed you, he would have killed you. And you know there are many times when you have escaped.
Oh yes, I do know this. I do know about this.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to present another scenario to you, and in this one, I want to talk about actual practical ways that we can start to find healing and start to connect with others. So one thing that you said is having honest conversations with God. And I remember something that Elise Jacobs had said as well. When she walks into a room and sometimes the first time she says, God, I feel like a mess. Or God, I feel like I'm upset. And that's how the conversation literally starts. But in this situation, I want to know practical ways that we can actually start to find healing and from healing be transformed to be redeemed. So there's a lady that I know reached out to me, mentioned how, her parents wanted her to be more involved with church, and that's very common in Nigeria, so that you don't become wayward. So the next option is to throw you into all the church activities. And so, likewise, they threw her into church activities as a child, but I think it was Reverend Fathers who used to molest her, and it went on for about 7 years. She would later grow up to be this young lady who could not, um, who couldn't go a day without having sex with at least three men. And then eventually she became pregnant. Then she had an abortion that almost took her life. And then even after that, with that experience, because she said she understood that what happened with that scenario, with the experience of having an abortion and all of that, was kind of like a wake up call. God was calling her and trying to show her, that you should do things differently. But she said even with that, she couldn't seem to stop. I guess it's because the root hadn't been resolved. But she couldn't seem to stop and she still struggled and she reached out to me. That was probably one of the hardest cases of all the different people who've reached out to me over time to even start to get into because I didn't even know where to begin, you know. And we have cases where with a lot of people, and I think this is one I would like to even get into, with a lot of young people who will tell their parents that this is going on. So the parents are not even involved, but they even somehow by an act of God are able to by themselves open up to their parents and they tell their parents and their parents don't believe them and say you are lying and believe the church over their children. How do you start to deal with stuff like that? How do you even come back? Because I was fortunate enough that, in the later years when I spoke to my mom, thankfully the kind of woman she is, we sat down, we had a full on conversation. She spoke to me, all the crying, all the everything that needed to be done was done, and we're able to come up with, a plan, sort of, with the guidance of the Holy Spirit to move forward in life. But a lot of people don't have this opportunity. Or what about people whose parents are now dead as well? What do we even say to people like that? How do they start? How do they start to walk back to finding, and not just forgiving, but going is it 360 or 180 to the other side where they're now fully grounded in the Father's love?
The first thing I want to do is I want to apologize. I really do. I want to apologize to everybody who has found themselves in that situation. I want to apologize on behalf of the church because the church should have been a place of refuge and instead it became the very place of abuse, and I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry. And I think we have to realize that even the church is made up of flawed individuals.
Very true.
You see, many times we see the church as this edifice, but it's actually a hospital of people at different stages of hurt. And it's unfortunate, because you said earlier that hurting people do hurt people. And it's unfortunate when people who are still broken themselves are allowed to have authority over people who need to be
Yep.
carefully tended.
Yes.
And you see, the Bible is very clear about people who lead other people astray, especially children. He said it's better for you to have a millstone hung around your neck and to be cast into the sea than to lead any of these children astray. That's in Matthew. And so we're not going to get caught up in what they should or should not have done because I feel like God is going to judge them.
Mm.
And to be honest, God sees everybody differently because He sees their brokenness. And if we should begin to ask God to begin to deal with people based on levels of brokenness, you get there'll be nobody standing, literally. But the question is this: how much do you want your healing? Because you can live life in reverse. You can live life blaming the church, blaming, your parents, blaming people who should have known better. But you're an adult now, and you may not have had control over the first 18, 20, 30 years of your life, but you have control over the next 30 years. And so it gets to a point in your life where you're like, do you know what? I'm tired of living my life like this. You have to get tired. Because what I found with God is that when you're still struggling, like a drowning person, if a drowning person is struggling, the lifeguard cannot help them because both of them are going to drown. So you have to get to the point where you actually relax and say, lifeguard, save me. And then he can carry you to safety. So if you're still struggling, you're still angry, but you have every right to be angry with God. God can take it. He can take it. He's not going to have his feelings hurt because he saw you in your line of progression. He saw how you got to where you are. So he can take it. Let him have it. But you're not just having a conversation for having sake. You're having a conversation because you do not want to continue your life as it is. And you have realized that the only person that can help you is God. But then have you even realized this? Because the thing about it is that many times we end up blaming God when we should be running to him. And I don't blame us because we've had experiences with people who should have looked after us. So with our human parents who should have fought for us, with the church who should have defended us, with our brothers and sisters who should have been aware of what was going on and they were not. So you felt alone. So how can you trust a God who seems like he's so remote and he's so out there? Like, if my people that I can see with my eyes can't help me, then what can God do? And that becomes the crux of the conversation, if we're being honest. And so you now get into this state of mind where I can do bad by myself, I can protect myself, I can fight for myself because I've been fighting for myself my whole life. But you can't. Because if you could, we will not be here having this conversation.
Exactly.
And so what I'm literally saying is I'm asking you to take a chance on God. Because he's the only one who knows you so intently, so inside and out. So he knows exactly the right buttons to press to heal you. But you have to let him. I'm talking to you as if you're the person, but I'm talking to the person and I know.
I need it. I need this.
Do you know what I mean? We have to get to the point. You see, let me explain. Let me break it down. Let me make it personal. So I was abused at age 5, right? In the same situation. My mom, single parents, so she left me with my grandparents, the houseboy. Wasn't sex, but wasn't sex, but it was molestation, right? And I didn't realize that it was at the bedrock of a lot of experiences that I had, growing up, because I shut it out. If I was 5, did you get? But in 2014, I was dating my now husband, and we're having a conversation. I was trying to understand some of my past experiences, and he just couldn't understand it because we're like, I don't understand. Why couldn't you walk away from this situation? Do you get what happened to your no? I was able to slap the person and walk away, but I couldn't. Like literally, I find myself frozen. Like my ability to say no had been taken away from me from such a young age, and he couldn't understand it until we started reading this book. It was called Healing in Hurting Places by I can't remember who, and then he understood, but I got angry. Because I'd always hidden it. Do you understand? So I didn't think that it was, it had a 5. How old was I then? I was maybe like 29, almost 30. So I'm like, that cannot be the reason why I've had all these experiences. It cannot be. But as I read it and I could see the similarities, I started to get really mad. So I got mad at my dad for abandoning us, my mom for us trying to give us a better life. My grandparents,
everybody just gets it.
And even angry with my boyfriend for even making me go to those places. And so in the middle of all of this anger, I'm not a violent person, but if I could have thrown something, I'd have thrown something. So I go to the church, and it's a Church of England church in the UK at the time. Do you understand? So it's not even a place that I'm expecting to have an encounter with the Lord. So I go there, and maybe there were only like 2 black people, but the other black person was not in church that day, so it's just me. So there are these couple that had just come back from Bethel in California, right? And it's the first time it ever happened to me. So the wife comes to meet me after the service, and she's like, God highlighted me to her. That God said to tell me that he loves my heart. I'm like, Excuse me.
Skills.
I would have thought she was mistaken, apart from the fact that, hello, it's only my face that is the color.
That is the
in
color
that
of
church.
this thing.
So I knew that it had to be me, you know. And so I went back to God when I got home and I said, excuse me, which heart? Me that I'm angry with you. You need to explain to me. And then God gave me the scripture, Exodus 19, verse 4. It says, I bore you on eagle's wings out of Egypt. And he decided to explain to me that the things I had gone through were literally and figuratively supposed to have killed me. But he's the one that protected me until I could get to this place of surrender. And so what happened was a series of honest conversations with God, telling God why I was so angry with everybody and everything, you know. But that's when my journey to true healing and intimacy actually started. And so it's okay to be angry. It's okay to blame all the other people, but it's okay also to take responsibility for your life. And responsibility is knowing that I can't help myself. I need God to help me. So whatever it takes, God, I just don't want to be this person that I have been. Practically, it will also mean uprooting yourself and planting yourself in the right places. And that in itself is a challenge, but we all know that our tribe, and you can testify to this as well, the tribe, and by tribe I mean the collective of friends, collective of people who will support you, who will have your back, they are integral to your healing process.
Very important.
Because God forbid that God is God is healing you here, then the same enablers are over there. It's a waste of time.
Yeah.
You know, so I find that that's one of the most practical ways. So when you are spending time in the secret place with God, which is having, you know, like when it's, let's use demystify the terms, and you're talking to God, when you're behind closed doors, having honest conversations with God, then you need to make sure that you are not being reinforced in the behavior that you're trying to get out of. So there are pages that you need to unfollow on social media, things you need to stop watching, TV shows, all the triggers. Do you know what I mean? With God's help, you're like, God, I don't want to be there. I don't want to do these things anymore. And then surround yourself with people who can actually help you. And that's what, you know, we try to build communities. God never sees us the way that we see ourselves. But what we find is that the church, instead of directing God to the Father, directing us to the Father heart of God, what it does is to pound the condemnation. Oh, look at you, you're such a sinner. As if anybody's sin is different. And have honest conversations. Let people know your struggles. Because you need to be able, you see, if you go to the hospital and the doctor asks you what is wrong with you, and you do not feel comfortable enough to have an honest conversation with that doctor, you cannot be healed.
Honestly, yeah.
What if the doctor is looking at you and saying, so you say
you are
exactly.
You need
And
what?
you will not be able to speak. But the doctor says, look, I'm here to help you, I understand. Do you understand? Then you're more comfortable. Unless, because I know people who struggle, I know ministers who struggle. I struggle with things. Do you get?
I know, you're so right, because now that you just mentioned that, I realize that there's a lot of doctors are more trusted than pastors. That's so true.
Because pastors try and make it seem like if you are going through stuff, do you get, then you're not a Christian. Or perhaps you have backsliding. But if we should ask you, dear pastor, how things are going, you know what the truth is. So, and don't hate someone just because their struggle is different from yours. You know, I thank God because God has given me heart that I'm not shocked by. God will not prove this theory, but I'm not shocked by anything I hear because, see, there are gradients. Somebody said to me yesterday, sent me an email saying, "Oh, when your past is so horrible or something like that, or I can't remember. She used the word that can God save you?" And I'm like, "Hello, who do you know that their past is clean?"
Exactly. Whose past is clean that doesn't need saving?
Do you understand? Like, if we did, then Jesus wouldn't have come. If we're all perfect, then what? Then why do we need Jesus? We're our own Jesus now, our own Savior. But the good thing about Jesus is that He takes us from where we are, but He does not leave us there, because His plan is for us to see ourselves as the mighty man of valor, as the altogether beautiful one without any flaws. So we have to trust God and allow Him to walk us through that process.
Thank you. So finally, I think the most important point that we've been able to expound on has been honest conversations with God, honest conversations with ourselves, so that the true process of healing can come to us.
That's very excellent.
Lovely having you.
Thank you.